Music always gets me hype. I'm excited. What was I going to say? Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at SheKnowsArsenal. So yeah, it's a random show today, but I made a promise to myself, mostly because I haven't said it out loud, that I wanted to cover a little bit more of Arsenal women in the academy just over the span of, the season. Nothing formal, nothing like every single month we're going to cover it, but just when it feels right. And right now it feels like a good time to maybe talk about the Arsenal women, because I feel like more people that weren't really interested in the women's team before are more interested now, because these new names are coming in, new managers come in, and they've really started the season really strong. So we'll just kind of touch on them a little bit. And then we'll also talk about Arsenal Academy. There's a narrative going around that Hale End is fail end, and we know that that's absolute bullshit. We have one of the best academies in the world. We just do. And the amount of talent that comes out of Hale End is amazing. And no, we haven't been able to capitalize on it as much as we probably wanted to over the last couple of years. But ultimately, I think that's because there was a loss of plan in between regimes with Raul and all the people that have been in and out of those executive positions have let some of these really talented kids fall through the cracks. And it's hurt us inevitably in the first team. And a lot of Arsenal fans don't really start thinking about the academy until they see somebody come in an FA Cup game, or they see somebody on the bench early in preseason. But there's a lot of things happening in the academy that shows that there is a change in direction for Arsenal Football Club moving forward, with a sustainable system that's going to help us be successful in the long term. And so I like to talk about it before it becomes obvious. I know that it's just more fun to talk about them when they're scoring goals for Arsenal, but there's some real good talent down in the academy. And not only that, I just feel like we're on the edge of seeing a new Arsenal that is exciting, kind of like a full 360 view of Arsenal, where it's not just about the men's team and who's starting games for the men's team. It's about the under 23s, the under 18s, everybody, the women and everything. And it's a collective approach that's going to be really, really good for Arsenal moving forward. So I'm interested in talking about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There's about 25 of you guys watching already. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in my panel today. I have Souls and George. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hi. So before we get started on the nitty gritty, we have to just talk about Champions League a little bit. Games just ended. Arsenal women, they were playing at the same time, and they thumped Spurs 5-1 because
it's happened again.
Yeah, it's happened again. So yeah, that's great. But during that time, there was some of the Champions League games going on, and I felt sad watching it a little bit. I mean, it was funny watching Manchester United struggle. We knew that they would, though, right? Because that's just how it goes under Ollie. But you just look at the quality, there's no Arsenal involved. Barcelona, wow. Real Madrid, wow. It's just not as good, and even at that, Chelsea's losing to Juventus, one of the worst Juventus teams that I've seen in my lifetime. What do you guys think about that? Like, do you just think that it's not as good, or is it just because Arsenal is not involved? I asked my mom this question the other day. I was like, is it boring, or is it just because we're not involved? And she said it's because we're not involved. But I tend to think that the quality is just, it's not there. It's not bumping the way it used to. You know what I mean? It used to bump. Like the Champions League used to be like the shit. Now it just feels like just another competition,
You know what? So I had this kind of debate when I was almost doing leagues, in a sense, which is maybe a weird example to use. But, when I started comparing League One, the Bundesliga, Serie A, and you start doing these rankings and you start to look at maybe the Champions League matchup, I think one of my big critiques of some other leagues is that the variety of quality is different. That's the big thing. So I'll tie it back here, where I feel as though the Champions League had a lot tighter spectrum of quality in past years. So what I mean by that is typically in a group, there was maybe one or two that, you would be a surefire win. Whereas I feel as though now the groups are far more open. And while it's maybe just one team that's absolutely relegated to Europa, and even then they do shock results to your Napolis, to your larger teams that have fallen off in recent years. And I just feel as though that quality gap has kind of increased, and I don't think teams are as dominant as they used to be in general. And so that's resulted in a lot more shock results in the Champions League. I think when you're looking at it, there's a lot of big teams in transition, a ton of big teams in transition, not many back to their former glory, so you don't get that monopoly as much. And I think it results in, I'll be honest with you, a poorer Champions League for sure. I completely agree with you. I don't think it's because we're not in it anymore. I think the quality that I'm seeing in terms of some of the football isn't the same, but that also reflects the states of some. Let's look at Napoli. Let's look at some of these teams that of past years were immense. I look back to, when Mesut Ozil came to us, back in 2013, right? And that first Napoli game was filled with quality. And Napoli weren't the same Napoli that they are now. And, that's not an analogy that I use lightly, because I feel that could apply to Juventus. I feel that could apply in a certain extent to Bayern. While they have a great squad and a manager I really believe in, they're struggling right now, and they're struggling in the league. And so there isn't that same 2012 Bayern dominance in that Jupp Heynckes, kind of area. And I'm looking around, and of course, every year that you're going to get somebody that's a contender, so to speak. And, not everyone's going to be in the same level. I just feel back in 2012, 2013, you had Real Madrid, who were at the top of their game. You had, Barcelona, who aren't nearly the same Barcelona as they are now. You had multiple contenders that you could say, wow, we've got monopoly games that really matter and are really on knife edges. Now I feel as though those knife edges have transferred to the group stage, whereas before it was almost like, nope, it's a buy-in in terms of the quarters, and really there's no point in watching the group stages until the quarterfinals. So, yeah, that's why I think the quality's changed. But I don't know, maybe it's different. Souls, do you agree?
Yeah, Souls. I mean, you're a big Barcelona fan. Tell me what you're looking at, because, I mean, wow. And I have to say, as an Arsenal fan, I am loving this a little bit, because getting slapped up by Barcelona, we've been slapped, So, but at the same time, don't you just miss seeing pretty football? Don't you just miss it? I feel like we're not seeing it, and we're missing it because Barcelona is not great.
This is the direct correlation of when quality gets spread throughout the leagues, in terms of there's no longer, as much as money matters, money doesn't matter. And I know that sounds a bit weird, because COVID has hit these big teams a lot harder, because their commercial revenue was what they relied upon. When we look at the Premier League alone, Arsenal reportedly lost nearly 300 to 400 million pounds in revenue. United reportedly lost nearly 590 million pounds in revenue. These are, in the Premier League, these are the two clubs who make the most commercial revenue, and they lost nearly $500 million in a season because of COVID, because of the lack of people coming into stadiums. Even when you look at Barcelona, Barcelona's revenue loss, not only did they lose that revenue in terms of 400 to 500 million pounds coming in from from stadium buyers, food and merch on the day, etc., but it was also, they had a 300 million euro naming right deal that also collapsed as well. That's a potential of nearly 700 to 900 million euros within a season that they no longer have to kind of buy that quality, or buy the gulf of quality that they normally do. Same with Real Madrid. And this is what's happened now, because these teams were so dependent on buying that superstar signing to refresh their team. They can no longer do that. Now they're following in the footsteps of the so-called smaller teams, where they're having to rely on a stricter budget, where they already, firstly, with a lot of these bigger teams like Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, they all needed to do a wage restructure, because they were already over the cap that was in place. But they got away with it because of the commercial revenue they brought in. And now they're having to get rid of certain players just to be able to get that wage budget to a 70% cap, which is what the La Liga set up. And that is all it is for me. As soon as that commercial revenue comes back in and they can start buying the talents, but also there is a rumor going around at Barcelona that there is a bailout from Dubai of a €1.5 billion loan being implemented with a low interest rate to repay, which they're not obligated to pay anything back for the first 2 seasons, which will allow them to bring in the quality they need in the transfer windows to come. And that is what it is. For me, it's a commercial revenue thing. And it's once that revenue is back, they'll start to spend as they were. Because if you think about it, Barcelona's lost Messi. Real Madrid they've lost Ronaldo, but were never able to replace him. Eden Hazard was that man to come in, but they wanted to get Mbappe in, but they couldn't get him in. And, it's similar with, like, for example, PSG are the monopoly of the Champions League because they've literally got a team that you build on FIFA. Forget about real life. That is like a FIFA team in real life. It genuinely is. Like, just everything. Like Donnarumma, for example, Hakimi, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe. Like, but the thing is, what football's come to is let's just buy the best of the best, but then there's no plan. And what we're realizing is the smaller teams have to have a plan. They have no choice. And that's why you're seeing the likes of Sheriff come in because they're passionate. They just want to win. They don't care. Like, this is their moment. And I think that passion of the Champions League in the big teams is just fired out. It's fizzled out.
Well, I think even if you guys go back, so look, Bayern are doing very well now to begin with, but when you go back to 2012 and that Jupp Heynckes era, like, they were almost an era of invincibility. And then you go back to Real Madrid at a similar time point, they carried similar levels of invincibility and perception. But then when you look at, PSG and you look at these big super teams on the whole, they're teams in transition. And so while Bayern is looking a lot better recently, which I attribute more to like Leroy Sané's pre-ACL form kind of creeping back and some stuff in terms of they're slowly starting to click. But, last season was very much a transitional year. PSG lost the title. It was a transitional year. Like, even in the Premier League, Man City, we ended up winning the league, but in Europe, very, very transitional in terms of their consistency. And so these big super teams, they're not carrying their domestic monopolies into Europe as much anymore. And I feel as though that means you've got kind of closer quality battles, essentially. And so I hope things go on, but they're very much a lot of super teams in transition. Real Madrid now, Barcelona now. I think Bayern are showing signs of getting out of that, but they still have to kind of have a season of consistency.
That's the thing too, George. Like, sorry to cut you off. Is that, of course, Bayern are good.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not that they're not good. I think they're being reductionist when I was saying that. It's more comparing their views.
Comparing to exactly 100%, and like it's even like last season, Barcelona were not great last season, but they were still in and around the top of La Liga. Because it's La Liga. Like, when I look at Bundesliga, it's one of those, isn't it? So when I think about it, and I remember old champion games, it was different, But this is $1 million question before we get off of this. Do you think we could beat Bayern now, or Barca now? Do you think we could beat them?
Yes, but just before Ansu gets full fitness, 100%. I think
we could. When I watch them, I'm like,
also Coleman's out. Coleman's gone. Coleman is getting fired tomorrow.
To be fair, like, I don't want to make it a segment or anything, but I feel as though any Barcelona coach at this moment in time is in a no-win situation. I feel as though that squad dynamics has not been filled with any sort of outlets. I feel as though that their team position is like, it's a horrible squad construction that even rivals us. Like, I'm saying that as an Arsenal fan, that it's horrible squad construction. Like, we know.
Coleman's clueless, man.
And he's not the greatest, but I just think that any coach in that situation would not be able to succeed with the group of players that they have. So it is really tough.
The group of players are talented. It's just, I don't think Coleman's I don't think they trust Coleman. He just doesn't see, like, he's changed everything. He's turned.
But you can see that it's old players that are just hanging around. And I think they love the club. Like, they actually love it enough to stay around and try to keep it together. And then you have some young talent that's not quite gelled together. And then you have some very averagey type players that are not horrible. I mean, I'm not saying they're Mustafi levels, but there's no foundation or plan just yet. And I'm pretty sure Barcelona will at some point figure out a plan and start to rebuild. But
their youngsters are going to save them. They do. Like, they have crazy youngsters, but
like Saka and ESR, like, I feel like they kind of have that little bit of like they have a young group of players that they could rely upon, but they kind of have to get rid of some of the older players, bring in some new players, go through some hard shit, and get a good manager. So they're kind of, I think, like a year or so behind us, to be honest, in terms of what they're doing. Because now our plan is clear, but before the plan becomes clear, you kind of have to go through that. Because remember, we started this like 2 seasons ago, but we couldn't see shit because all we could still see was these older players still in our team. doing nothing.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, like they're a problem of almost a decade of poor decisions in a sense. And what I mean by that is it's not necessarily like one piece where they definitely have promising youngsters, but their squad profile and age is all over the place. Their wage construction is all over the place. It neglects them from really recruiting in the amount and the necessary positions. And I actually don't think that they've been smart in their recruitment. Like I said before, they lack outlets. That team construction has been really, really poor. But they do have an exciting base. And I think with Barcelona, maybe just to tie it back to Arsenal in a sense, they have a legacy that they never will be in trouble, in my opinion. And so there's a certain level of story, just how Lukunga, we saw quotes earlier today, kind of posted about this on Twitter, where there's a difference in terms of legacy is not short term and it can't be easily accumulated, no matter how much a modern fan really wants to believe that it can. And so there will always be teams, there will always be players that are willing to play the Barcelona shirt, regardless of current short-term position. And, that's basically what Lukunga was saying in terms of, yeah, I understand that there's a short term, but Arsenal is Arsenal. And I feel as though when you have a super team like Barcelona that have a culture and a history like that, you carry that level of perception in global standing, regardless of your short-term pain. So I'm not worried that, Barcelona are never going to be back again in a sense, but they are in a tough spot. And I don't think that in their current position, they necessarily challenge what we have right now. Like you said, Jess, we're probably a year or so ahead of their development.
So let's pivot just back to Arsenal and let's talk about a team that actually has won the Champions League. That is an Arsenal team, which is the Arsenal women. And I want to heap some praise on them just a little bit, because if I could do anything, I just want people to be open-minded about the women's game, because it is good to watch. I know that it's like, well, it's slower and and should they have smaller fields, and it's good football, and Arsenal women play good football. That league, the WSL, is actually very, very nice to watch, and we happen to have the best team in the league. So if you haven't watched them, you should. They have a new coach now, and I want to get his name right. I don't want to.
Heisdel?
Yeah, it's
Jonas Heisdel?
It's Idevall. It's Idevall, and he's Swedish, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he won like the Swedish Super League a bunch of times, and he's come in and really changed things from Joe Montemurro. Joe was kind of set in his ways, and when you have a manager that's been around for a long time and is set in his ways, although you're still quite competitive and quite good, sometimes you need to, change it up. We know that from like Arsenal men, that he was kind of like their Arsene. He really, really was. And even though they were still competitive and ended up getting Champions League anyway, they weren't up there really with Man City and Chelsea. They had kind of already ran away with it. And it's so funny how parallel it is to watch Joe Montemurro have this really good team, still not really as competitive as Arsenal should be considering our status, and watching Chelsea and Man City kind of run away with it, and Manchester United a little bit as well, that kind of had gotten a couple good players and got into the mix. And I kept thinking to myself, they need to get it together, because if they don't, they'll end up like Arsenal men.
Yeah, do you know what it is? Go ahead. You know what it is? It's like this is the thing that we've all said about Wenger, is timing is key. And I think Joe got out at the right time, where he still had an elite level squad for the women's game, and there was a basis to build on. So the next manager that comes in, whoever it may have been, obviously, it was, and they'd have something to build upon, rather than what the men's got left with was this crap to deal with, where you're having to get rid of like wholesale changes before you can even compete. And it's taken us like nearly 3 to 4 years to do that, or 3 to 4 seasons. Whereas with the Arsenal one, yes, they added in Tobin Heath, and I don't think they added much more than that. But Heath was the biggest signing that they made of the summer, and that's all they really needed, because they did have a good foundation. They weren't far off, but it was just like you said, he was stuck in his ways. And I think it's the right time to then bring in new ideas, because I think they finished 4th in the league last season. So it's and this team should. Or third, so they finished
third, because otherwise they wouldn't have. I think because they did get Champions League, and they barely made it by the skin of their teeth.
They're playing Barcelona next week.
They barely made it. But the thing is, the key point there, Souls, is that they didn't wait too long, and they made sure that they didn't lose Viv. If they had lost Miedema, they would have had to start all over. They made sure that they brought in a new manager, and they brought in Tobin Heath, another girl named Magam, I think as well. She's pretty good. And Iwabuchi. And one of the biggest Yeah, one of the biggest dings against Joe is that the squad was thin. And if you look at Man City and Chelsea's sides, they have two teams that they can play with. Arsenal was
And
playing
they've
with
added
just
Lauren James as well now to their
who added Lauren James?
Chelsea.
Chelsea. Yeah. Oh, and we also got Nikita Paris as well from Lyon. So they added depth and quality. And look, we're back. We're back. And it's just so nice to watch, you know, and I just, if you guys don't watch them, you should. We're battering teams 5-0, 5-1, just killed Spurs. And yeah, 100%. So, George, what do you think? I know you're not big on the women's team and all that kind of stuff, but just in terms of feeling like this might be
like the way you made it sound is like he doesn't believe in him.
No, it's not that, because we already kind of talked about it.
I don't
And
watch
if you're
them.
not,
I don't
yeah.
watch them where I'm necessarily too much of an expert. You know, I catch the odd game if it's like Man City, and if it's like a big one, you know, I'll turn it on if there's nothing on. But yeah, I don't follow them as closely. But the one thing I do follow is their coach, because I find him kind of awesome. You know, so I find the similarities that you draw between a Joe Montemurro and how they kind of switched immediately to that type of coach, and they skipped the Emery appointment in a sense. Like, that was something I drew a very big comparison with. And of course, I love Medema. I think she's immense. And you know what? The one big thing that I've always felt as though is there's a lot of bias in terms of whether or not, you know, women's can translate their play in terms of men's leagues. And there are, you know, some quality perceptions that, you know, I just don't think are true. So I would probably encourage people to absolutely go and watch. I think Vivian Medema is, you know, among the best women's players, not just now, but has been for a while. I mean, you know, she's iconic. Mm-hmm. Like, she's been killing it for years now. And I think potentially losing her would have been very, very difficult to recover from. It would be almost a case of, you know, Messi in their prime leaving, not Messi old age now. Like, Vivian is very much still an absolute dominant force in that league and in that game, period. But I think their coach has brought in absolutely that Mikel Arteta effect of a very young, innovative coach that's looking to do things slightly differently, potentially a little bit erratic, and but doing things very well in terms of a rebuild. You know, for example, one of the things I remember him doing this summer was maximizing set pieces offensively. And that's something that they absolutely have done, you know, this season in the very few games. I mean, I only watch kind of Chelsea, you know, and City, and I don't watch them regularly. But when I have this season, they've been really good on offensive set pieces. So he strikes me as a kind of an intellectual in a sense, where he's able to really recognize the changes quite quick and employ them. And of course, he has that kind of passionate connection with the fans. Like, you could tell, like, this guy's jumping on the sidelines, and, you know, he's very involved. You know, he gives me that, like, younger Mikel version, but almost Klopp in a sense, like that personality. And it's nice to see, because I'm sure in terms of a women's coach, like, when you've dominated that long, you expect that. And I mean Arsenal in that sense. Like, Joe, although he's declined, he had such a dominant period that wasn't too far away. Like, I don't think it was quite the Arsene Wenger mold where we watch somebody great dwindle. Where
no, he's still kind of up there still.
Kind of up.
And I think he went to Juventus, like the Juventus women's team. So it's not like he was never going to get another job. And if you had said Joe was going to stay, I don't think a lot of people would have been like upset or like, because he's still a good coach. But one thing that you need to freshen things up again before it gets stale. They press now. Their structure is so much better. They're not relying on the individual brilliance of certain players. They're playing like a team and not letting Viv leave. I mean, we have the best striker in the world. You don't let that go. You don't let that go, and you fill the team with players that can compete with her. And we didn't do the whole, oh, we already have Mead and we have Paris, so don't get Tobin. We did what like top teams do. We went and got Tobin as well. So somebody's asking who my favorite women's player is. My favorite women's player is Tobin Heath. So I was very like borderline emotional. Like, you know, when I was like, she's really coming to the Arsenal. She's a Gooner and always has been for like her whole entire life, which makes a lot of sense. Played for North Carolina, the best women's program in the United States. Absolute baller, been in the U.S. women's national team for, it's got to be going on a decade now. And I'm happy to, and the good thing about it is from a U.S. women's perspective, I know it's kind of going off on a tangent, but we've lost some pace. we've lost some pace. Some other teams have been able to kind of step up and be really competitive. And the WSL in England is the best league. And so seeing her kind of wanting to compete at the top is good, especially at her age, because I think she's like 32. I think we're like the same age. So yeah, I'm just so happy. And like, you guys, if you don't watch, you should be. But I think the bigger thing is seeing that all of our programs, all of our mini sectors within Arsenal are all trying to change things around
in
to
the right
get back.
way as well, too,
Exactly.
Jess, right? Like, I
100%.
think, like, a big thing, like, look, I don't follow the women's intricacies in terms of their game, but the one thing I do know is Arsenal have always been ahead of the curve in terms of offering women's sports a platform to succeed, and even since their history in terms of giving them a platform to show themselves. And I think, like, the big thing that I just noticed, broadly speaking, because I don't know the intricacies quite well, is that they've sped up their recycle era a lot quicker than we did. And maybe they learned from the men's league. I don't know what it is, because they seem to be making the right decisions at the right time. I mean, I look at Vivian Miedema, and I kind of look at it with Alexis Sanchez situations where there was huge links to Lyon, if I'm correct, right? Like, and there was, and it wasn't just a little bit. Like, there were very credible links that she was likely to go. And the fact that you managed to recruit a young, innovative manager as quick as you did, get your superstar to sign on and kind of buy into the project again, because she did need to be bought into the project, and you supplement in a way that, you know, makes her flourish. It wasn't just that you bring in competition. So it wasn't just that, you know, you're giving partnerships to your superstars. I think the men's football team can really learn a lot about those broad structures. Support your superstars, Thomas Partey, cough, cough. You know, make those early decisions when you need to. Buy into a young manager project that has modern ideas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that just structurally you go auga about, and you're like, oh, no wonder they're doing well. Like, no wonder they're successful.
Exactly.
But the other thing is the unity within all three fractions that we're going to be talking about in terms of the men's football, in terms of women's football, and the under 23 is, you know, they're all taking pictures together. You know, if you actually watch it's more than the Instagram stories that I see it, and you know, I think it was like last week or something. I think it was Holding and Liam Williamson, like they're in the gym together, for example, and I know that sounds like such a weird thing to draw upon, but what that does is a culture thing, and it's a DNA. Not only are we saying now that it's the men's game or it's the women's game or it's it's we are Arsenal, and what that does, it creates a atmosphere that we need to excel. If the women's game is excelling, it makes the men's want to do better. If the men's game is excelling, it makes the women. No one's sitting there and going, oh, it's the men's, you know, whatever, or oh, it's the women's, whatever. Like, no one's looking down upon each other. It's like one big family, and that's, for me, one of the key reasons why everything's now being put into place, because it's a structure from top to bottom, and it's about we're succeeding together. We don't want just one fraction to succeed, and we're going to put all our eggs into the men's game or the women's game or the under. No, we're going to make sure everything is getting equal opportunities and equal investment into it. And I think that needs to be drawn upon as well, because they're all using the same facilities.
It's not, because I think the thing that made me worry was when I heard that the City Group was doing that. Yeah. When they were, everything is together. The women's team, the men's team, and the academy all works together under a single philosophy, and they only pull within the City Group to make things happen. And they want to make sure that Manchester City women are just as competitive and are just as good in, obviously, in their levels to the men. And I was like, oh shit, we need to be doing that too. Like, it shouldn't be separate. The women's team has always been really good, but the men's team has fallen off. But with the little changes that are coming, and they're consistent good changes, it's not going to happen over time or overnight. But you see the men's team, they went out in this transfer window, bought players for the future and to improve Arsenal right now as well. Arsenal women have done the exact same thing. You know, I think the under 23s and the women and the men have all had coaching changes within the last 5 years. You know, they're making changes. So I think it's nice to look at it from a holistic thing and just take stock of all of it, because I do think Arsenal is changing, even though we can't really see it at the moment. It's not, we don't have Champions League trophies. Things are changing, but
yeah, but this is the thing I was talking about earlier when we were on the football terrace, and I was talking about the structure change that's coming in. We are following in the footsteps of big European sides. We are a little bit behind in terms. England are a bit behind in terms of when they develop and adopt these changes, and we've seen this I've seen it at Barcelona. I'll talk about the Barcelona example because I actually know it inside out. And at La Masia, this is what they were doing. They've always said that, look, it's always going to be one team. It's going to be one way of playing. You're going to be managed, obviously, in separately when you need to be, but we're also going to develop you into, like, the women's are going to play with the men's game, and we're going to train together. There's certain aspects, obviously, you can't have a full-on game like men versus women, but we're going to train together. We're going to coach you together so that you understand the DNA and the philosophy of the club. And this is what's now being brought over. Like, obviously, the City Group, they're investing, I think, $1.5 billion into it, and they're looking to now basically make an academy school where their footballers go to, and they grow up together. They'll come into the ranks together, and it's that very American style being brought in as well. And now, obviously, at Arsenal, we're now doing that. We're following in the footsteps, and we're taking what's good and what works and the structures that have worked for other teams to succeed, and we're bringing it in. And it's only going to make everything better, not just one fraction.
I think it's about a cultured winning mentality first. And I mean, I do know a lot of the youth infrastructure changes that probably leads us into a really nice transition. But like the big thing in terms of really the women's, I just want to give them their last bit of plaudits, because I think there's a huge amount of infrastructure changes at Colney that they're also willing to do. The investment into that program has been that of a winning culture. And I think when you combine that at all levels of a club, but also a corporation, that's really the recipe for success. I mean, there really is, it's down to the tea lady kind of tropes. I mean, you do need to breed that culture in everything that you do. And City have always been really great about revolutionizing that. But I really feel as though Arsenal are taking the next steps in order to unify that vision in each of their departments. It really is a professional approach. But there's tons of stuff that we've done with the youth that, I'm happy, like, we're going to probably go into.
Let's pivot. Let's pivot. Let's go. Let's do it.
So
let's talk some of the changes, or what do you know, George? What do you know that we don't?
Well, there's been, so this youth revolution really led by Per Mertesacker started back in 2018. This idea that there's been an Arsenal way of playing was developed with Marcel Lucassen, by the way, back in 2018, and we did start to develop an Arsenal way of playing, because there's a very famous quote of Marcel basically saying, he was asking coaches about there being a way of playing that was unified, and no one could give him a straight answer. And there was a development between this kind of young gunner program that Per Mertesacker really developed in terms of how we're going to teach the academy. And that began a unified approach similar to La Masia. But the big thing was we started to really gut out the youth recruitment. We started recruiting from some of the best in the country. Lee Heron from Reading, who at the time was revolutionary in terms of his youth domestic recruitment. We then started to poach some of the best youth coach talents in the England FA. Dan Machichi, who was back at MK Dons, who, from a youth perspective, were responsible for developing Dele Alli. And they were at the head of the game in terms of youth recruitment in the time. And so when you start to look back at some of these big youth changes, we started doing that. And, Kevin Betsy, I predicted in the summer he was likely to come. Kevin Betsy was also the U23, not U23, but he was the U17 World Cup winner along with Phil Foden back in the day. And so Dan Machichi actually worked under him in the U16s, and there was a previous pathway within the England FA. And so what you're really getting right now is a dedicated recruitment that doesn't look disjointed. You've got people and coaches that have worked together in the past. Kevin Betsy's responsible in the U23s, but Dan Machichi has now moved up in terms of the U18s. And so that pathway is synergistic to a lot of the FA that they did. Another kind of new thing that we've done and added is Ken Gillard was, our previous kind of coach in terms of, the U18s. And what they did was they brought him in to work with Ben Naper, who's our loan manager, to then actually map out exactly where these youngsters should go. So Ben Naper always was our new loan manager that was introduced back, I think it was back in 2018 as well. But Ken Gillard was moved into this position in order to really facilitate where these youngsters could go, knowing them, which I think was absolutely massive in terms of why we see Aziz at Portsmouth, for example, who worked with Dan Crowley and, Emile Smith-Rowe. And so what you're really seeing is it's not chance. The idea that we've sat there and we've started to recruit multiple classes of consecutive awesome talent really has been going since 2018. And, Per Mertesacker has really done an excellent job in terms of really refreshing kind of recruitment, but also making sure we have a unified philosophy, making sure we're stealing from the best England FA talent, who, by the way, went through a massive restructuring many years ago. And so they have this awesome youth talent that I think we've really monopolized the domestic market. You're looking at Mika Bareth, who came from Fulham as one of their top goal scorers for the U18s. Our domestic recruitment, not just in terms of youth, but like in terms of international recruitment, has been insane. Tim Akinola, Salah Adin, Omar Rekic, we have really sat there and started to invest in this youth policy. And not everyone will make it, but what we've done is we've really future-proofed and bubble-wrapped the ways that you can't lose. You've increased the possibility and probability of winning. We stole Amani Richards from Chelsea, who are among the best, academy. Cobham, might probably say, is next to, Hale End, is probably the best academy that we have in the system. Really, they're excellent. But we have really professionalized how we do things. So the loan pathway has become a lot more professional. The recruitment in terms of the youth has been a lot more professional. And then, of course, I think Kevin Betsy is really, when you start to look at what he's done positionally, it really starts to align to what the first team is doing. And so not only is there a pathway that we've really started to have, but the structure behind those moves means that it makes sense. And that's why I really started just with the structure changes, because you can't really understand the difference on the pitch without understanding what's been done behind the scenes in order to facilitate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that some Arsenal fans, which is not a ding or anything, they don't care until they see them on the pitch, like for an FA Cup game or whatever, like who's there, but ultimately sometimes it's the journey, and it's how you get to the destination. How did these kids get into the first team? Why are we hearing about a Charlie Patino now? Why do we have a top talent in Aziz? How did he get here? I think that's important too, because if you don't understand how you got there, I just feel it's not as fun. So that's why we talk.
You also don't get multiple years, Jess. Like the issue is, you don't get sustainable success without those infrastructure changes to produce multiple classes. You get basically the United effect of having one class, but not being able to produce it throughout the years. And like these changes about having a way of playing, having a specific systematic way to do loans, having people do PowerPoints to get our players and making sure that we're giving them to positions that we know, and having a coach that's probably coached them has been absolutely insane. And, you start to look, okay, like your Patinos and whatnot, like we have actual classes that have gone back since U16 at this point in terms of talented youngsters that we're recruiting, and I mean, we have those superstars that, people talk about, in your Patinos, but then there's a bunch like Brooke Norden-Cuffy, Zayn Monlouis, and like we'll get into like specific players that I can talk about, but these are really young guys that haven't just started at the U23 level. We don't just get one class. We have now had 3 or 4 consecutive classes that have succeeded, not just here, by the way, but elsewhere. Josh Da Silva, who's left us, is starring for Brentford. He's injured right now, but he's gone to Brentford and really killed it. Yunus Musa has moved on to Valencia. Like we are producing talents that have made a career in the professional game, and I really feel it's important to highlight those infrastructure changes. Otherwise, you don't understand why it's successful, and if you don't understand why something's successful, you can't reproduce it. So yeah, it's very exciting looking at what's been done. And now we're really seeing the fruits of those 2018 moves and labors.
Now let's talk about specific players, because that's what people want to hear about. Throwing all these names out here, and I'm just like, we're not going to get to all of them, but we'll talk about the main ones that are on everybody's like lips. The first one I do want to talk about is Aziz, because I was dying to watch him play for Portsmouth. I didn't get to see it, because they didn't have the game in the United States. I couldn't see it, but I could see his little compilation. And I saw just what I thought I was going to see. He played in 10 role, I think. So he didn't play like in the pivot or CDM or whatever, but he played a little bit further up the pitch. And what I did see is that he was doing a lot of filling in on the left-hand side and nice switches and a lot of ball progression and very neat on the ball. Typical Aziz-like stuff. But what I was really looking for is, I mean, he's in a league that I would feel like if he's what we think he is, it should look easy. Kind of like Emile Smith-Rowe. Like, you know what I mean? He kind of went out there, and it looked like he was kind of above. You know, he might physically need something, but it didn't look difficult. You know, he wasn't struggling. And that's kind of what I saw. He wasn't struggling technically to keep up with that team. So I'm thinking, okay, good move, you know, good move. But now we're coming up into January, you know, we're looking towards January. We're losing a midfielder already in Granite. And some are like, okay, well, couldn't we do the recall and bring him back in? And I'm watching him on his loan and I'm like, I think I'd prefer him to just stay out there and just live his life, you know. But George, for you, like, Aziz has played in so many different positions, 6, you know, holding midfield, 10. He can play everywhere throughout the midfield. What do you think is his true position? And from what you've seen from him at Portsmouth, how far do you think he is to being ready?
So Aziz is difficult with Portsmouth because he's been injured. And so he's had a very stop-start loan development. You know, he's been injured for a little bit. So realistically, his game time has been tough. So from speaking on Portsmouth, you can't really get a level about how he's handling the league because he's been injured. So it's very tough, but I do know Miguel quite well because, you know, he's one of my top-rated youngsters. And, you know, he's played 6, 8, 10. The big thing where I see him is he's done interviews where he said, you know, Per Mertesacker has looked that there's maybe a spot in terms of the 6th position, but I don't really see him there long term. This kid is really the modern midfielder. He can be anything that you want. He's got such excellent long range passing, but shooting. He's very cute in the final third. He's got a final third pass and he's got an engine. I think the one critique that I have of him, though, is his defensive awareness and a little bit of his positioning, where of course, those things can be worked on. And, you know, he scans so regularly that you don't really worry about him never learning that aspect. But I feel as though his ability to affect play in the final third can't be restricted. And so for me, he's just a true box-to-box midfielder that can totally play, you know, up the wing and down. He's classic in terms of, you know, receiving the ball. I think his superpower for me is that half turn set and then pass. He's really, really good at understanding his surroundings, receiving play, turning, and then driving forward with the ball. Like, he's really, really good at that. And of course, that can lend itself to 6, but he doesn't have the defensive awareness that I do worry, where I feel as though it would be a waste of his talents, particularly in the final third. You know, I think he's got such excellent long range passing, but also that final ball, it would be a waste not to see it higher up the pitch. And I think when we talk about Charlie Patino, you've got somebody that's a lot more suited to the anchor role than, you know, Miguel is, in my opinion. So yeah, I think we've got like an absolute modern midfielder. He's 100%. Yes, he does have a 5-yard burst. Nashville, absolutely. He's got everything that I absolutely love. Like, this kid, I rate him so, so highly. Just earlier in the season, you know, I questioned why we needed Lukunga based on how highly
I was going to ask you that, like, how far ahead is Lukunga to Aziz? Like, what is the difference there? Is it just first team football or what is it? Like,
it's absolutely first team football. Like, he's gotten a chance in terms of Belgium to be recognized in that aspect. But, you know, I really think that, you know, Miguel has qualities that I don't see with Lukunga. Lukunga is much more a 6-8 hybrid type of player. You got to look at Miguel Aziz as a 6-8-10. I kind of say, like, this guy can literally do it all. Yeah, like, he can do it all. He can affect in every single phase of play. And I feel as though Lukunga, he has attributes that are best suited to the first and second phase. So it's a little bit more difficult to really compare the two. Because I think Lukunga has a lot more issues off the ball, but he looks a little bit more cultured running with the ball and having head up. But Miguel has a bigger passing range, in my opinion. I think Lukunga sees passes better in terms of his perception and through the lines, but he doesn't have as big of a range as Aziz does. And Aziz is a little bit more physical in the challenge. Like, he's a little bit more ready for the fight in duels than Lukunga is right now. It's just, I think they're slightly different players. And I think Aziz is just so much more box to box, whereas I really do see Lukunga far more in the 6-8 mold, contributing into the first phase, essentially.
You know, what's so weird is that in the first team, we seem so light in midfield, but like, we have midfielders coming out of our ears. Really, we do. Like, if we just wait a couple of years, you know. But Souls, I want to get you in here and to talk about Patino. You know, I think I didn't really even think about him before people started really going in on him. Like, that's just my thing. It's just sometimes, like, some players you really get into and others you don't. And they've been kind of talking about him. I'm like, okay, Patino, he's there. But now I'm watching him and I'm just like, got a little gem here. Like, what is this? And I agree with George when I watch him, and I'm like, I feel like he has a little bit of the Wilshires about him. Like, he can play in that deeper role, you know, and you need somebody that can take the ball off of the back line and dribble forward and do all these different things. He's really, really good, but people are calling for him to be in the first team. Souls, what do you think about that? He doesn't look physically ready, does he? He looks like a kid.
We've been spoilt because we've had a few players come through the academy and just come straight in terms of Bukayo Saka. So everyone's like, why can't he do it? There's a difference. Like, there's certain players who do it. It's a rarity to happen. Obviously, in the Premier League, we've been spoilt with that in terms of obviously Bukayo Saka coming straight from the academy, straight into the first team. Mason Greenwood, same thing. Marcus Rashford, same thing. Phil Foden, same thing there. Mason Mount went out on a loan. And the thing is, we forget that actually there is a development plan and you need to be... There's a few things. Look, as a player, yeah, he might be ready in terms of attributes, whether he can actually play, but physically, he's not ready. Like, there is the problem is we forget how physical the Premier League can be, and the step up from under 23s into first team football, into men's football, it is because there's all sorts of physical battles. You're now you're no longer coming across another 23-year-old or another 20-year-old or an 18-year-old. It's like, in my own personal development, when I used to play football, when we're in the under 12s and we make the step up to under 13s, or sometimes you'd skip a few years and go from under 12s to playing under 15, you'd see the difference. Like, just playing, like, for example, when you're in like sort of year 7 playing a year 8 or a 9, you'd see the difference in physicality. Like, they would dominate you because they were just bigger, they were a lot more, like, they're stronger. That's just natural with age. I'm not saying everyone's like that. Some people are just a beast from a young age, but he's just not that for me. And I think what we need to do is just remember that. We need to remember that physically he will develop. He's in the first team setup. He's been introduced into it. He's training with them on the odd occasion. And then obviously when he needs to train with the under 23s to go back to playing with them, that's what he does. And that's the natural progression. He might need a loan, but the thing is, we need to stop putting so much pressure on these youngsters to come through and shine, because for me, I don't think he does that. Even Miguel Aziz, for example, got cameo performances in Europa League.
There's a difference, though, that why he was chosen, Souls, and Patino wasn't.
That's what I was getting on to. Like, even with that, like, even with Balogun, for example, and even Eddie Nketiah getting these like sort of what so-called cameo performances within the Europa League, within the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup, respectively, it's because physically their markup was there. They could physically handle it, and that's the big difference. But whereas with Patino, look at him, he literally doesn't like.
He's 2 to 3 years away. I said it in the summer. He's very much okay. So people have said that Saka didn't look ready. Hogwash, because it's not about frame. It's about your leg strength. And one of Saka's superpowers has been turning on the half turn in contact. And when you look at Patino, he's absolutely elite technically. There's nothing that I'm going to teach Charlie Patino about how to play on the ball. But off the ball, he's 6 foot and he's not in a man's body. He really isn't. And in challenges, he struggles. And in fact, putting somebody into an adult football before they're ready doesn't give them the best conditions to win and also to succeed. Because I had this argument on Twitter. You arrive once in terms of your perception when you're an academy player. And not everyone's ready, but you must absolutely, when you arrive, be ready. And Aziz, the reason he was given his debut is because, he physically was able to compete in the challenges, and he always has been. He's been much bigger, much sturdier. Same as Saka. Saka absolutely had that ability in the challenge to turn, and we see it on the international stage. And that's the difference between. And Patino has always played up. By the way, he's been so good at the academy that he plays up. And I think a big reason is when you're technically so proficient, you lose those kind of physical marks that you really need in order to translate your play. I don't know. Patino is more, just for profile wise for people, he's more in the Frankie de Jong profile, but he doesn't have that burst that Frankie does. And I think that's purely because of his frame. Like, he's more Rodri in how he attempts defensive challenges, which I don't like, by the way, but the way he carries and the way things are effortless to him in terms of, just switching play, in terms of receiving on the half turn, selling feints. Like, he is unbelievable. Don't get me wrong, but the poor kid he's just not ready. He's 2 to 3 years away.
Yeah.
I just want to say another example of this is within the whole Premier League setup is look at Marcus Rashford, for example. When he made his debut, he was that skinny kid. As soon as the summer hit, what did they tell him to do? Go hit the gym, get bulked up. Same with Mason Greenwood. Same with Bukayo Saka. Like Saka, I'm not saying he's bulked up, but he's a lot. Like his arm strength, for example, is a lot there. His chest has been a bit more built up. ESR is going to go through that as well. That's why he's got these fatigue issues, and that's the difference. They need to have to like George said, the leg strength firstly, because you're going into tackles 24/7 in a game. So just
that's the key indicator that I use for a lot of youngsters is leg strength. And it's not that frame wise you can be skinny, but for me that doesn't really matter. I'll be honest with you, because very much like Bukayo, he wasn't jacked and he wasn't in a man's body when he came in, but his leg strength and low center of gravity was absolutely immense, and that's why you're able to take a chance on those types of players. And I just don't feel as though Patino is ready quite yet. Perhaps next season with a preseason, but I love the fact that he's training with the first team and just getting ingrained in the culture, but he's not actually playing. There's no need for that. We don't
have to rush him. And another thing that I learned from somebody who I feel like a lot of people really respect is Clive. And I never thought about this before. And it made it more. I realize why some young players come into the first team and they may play centrally in the academy and end up playing wide is because those central spaces are where you get killed. You're playing in the midfield as a young kid. You have to, it's not even just about your physical strength. It's about your IQ under pressure. Sometimes when you're under stress, your body doesn't work the same, so I'm just thinking for the central midfielders that we have coming through the academy, you have to give them more time. And even if they come into the first team, they may not play their natural position, because I'm telling you, like holding midfield 6s, 8s, that's where the game is won and lost. We know with Granit and Thomas, the difference between those two players when they receive the ball off of the goalkeepers and stuff like that. So do you really want Patino doing that? And your technical quality doesn't show as much if somebody can just bully you off the ball. And I think a big guy, even if he's not a good player, like a Sissoko, will make Patino look like a player that's never kicked a ball before, because it just bully him off the ball.
And that's not providing the right environment for them to thrive, right? Like that's what I talk. So a lot of people, look, the big debate is Wimbledon. Is he ready? Is he not ready? I mean, for me, it was ridiculous to even to suggest it, because Wimbledon are a team of absolute monsters in the middle. Look at their average height. Like, it was ridiculous. So forget the fact that it's a bad time to do it. It was the bad matchup to even put him in. And for me, like you talked about, Jesse, look, what we do as coaches and youth coaches is you have a great football education to learn some of the skills. If you actually look at, Saka, why do we put him as wing back? By the way, Wenger did this with all of our young wingers. And what it was really was to show them to appreciate the defensive duties of the game. Once you are able to master that, they slowly move you potentially in attacking midfield, where you can actually have options and you're able to be protected in a sense. And by the way, Bukayo did exactly that. We moved him from left wing back to really our number 10 in the left center mid. And then finally he found his home at right wing, which is where he is. Charlie and everybody in the academy are going to go through those youth switches of position, but they're just getting a good football education. It has nothing to do with their talent ID and whatnot. But I think for the big part of this is that you want to make sure that you give them the best pathway to succeed. That's really what it is. Could Charlie have come in and competed? There's a possibility, but is the probability that he does well high? No, because he's just not physically ready. And you know what? Catalan Surgeon, other couple players, Salah Adin, who had a year out of injury, but has been absolutely immense, right? These are players that are just physically underdeveloped, but, are really burgeoning talents. And you just got to be very careful, for example, why Charlie Patino was chosen to stay and Aziz went on loan to adult football. Like, these decisions are very much based in the fact that, physically there's a little bit of development still to go. And while Mikel may have said that, Charlie is close to us, he was using that because there's a lot of hype. It wasn't a sense that he's likely to be put in. A lot of it was because there's been a lot of hype on this kid for so long. And, I really doubt that we see him this season, and that's fine. Next season, I'm okay with cameos because I feel as though he will grow another year and he'll be roughly 18, right? So for me, that's okay. He might get some more leg strength and I'll just play it by year. But, right now, Patino is not at the level. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that he's poor. I just hope that gets across to people. Like there's a
And it's
very
not
big difference.
Elneny's better than Patino. It's not that,
No,
because I was
it's
seeing
not.
that people were like, Xhaka's injured, Patino in. And I
Yeah.
was like, you guys do realize Elneny still exists. I can't believe you just said Elneny. And I'm like, did I say Elneny was better? But like, seriously, like we're talking about a kid coming in.
Yeah.
Do you
And
know what the
like,
funny thing is? Two of the arguably greatest of all time in our generation did the same thing. They were both forced onto the wings when they were central players, because that is the natural development. You can't, like, even Pep said it, like he is going to play on the right wing. He's not going to be a centre forward. And then 2 seasons after his debut, did he become that true centre forward? And that's naturally how you do it, because not every. The thing is, we get sort of overwhelmed with youth players because of, oh my God, look how he done it. Like Rashford's a striker in the under 23s or under 18s whilst he was developing. What's the first thing they did? Put him on the left wing.
It's
Mason
because
Greenwood's the same as well.
because you know what it is, guys. Like I'll get very specific into the coaching. Like for like 10 seconds, is the wing reduces your space. So when you're growing up in terms of a midfield, you have options ahead of you and you have tons of space. But realistically, what it does is it emulates the idea that you're not going to have that space in adult football. When you're getting closed down, you're actually forced on the wing to cut off your options and therefore make quicker decisions. Some of the biggest things that we have with youth talent that are transitioning to adult football is they believe they have more time on the ball because, they were so good that they did. And so that gap in terms of being able to really translate, it is sped up on the wing, because the same way of Nico Pepe kind of forcing his decisions, you cut out an angle. And so you're forced to make those quick decisions regardless, because they're not available to you. So that's what we do as like youth coaches. If they were starting up in the middle and we move them on the wing, I do that with a lot of my guys as well. In fact, some of my center backs, I move into center mid so that they can understand gait and how to receive the ball. And, they get slaughtered, and I know that they will. But I move them into midfield so that they can understand, look, how you position your body is very important, and you're going to get a lot more pressure in midfield than you would at center back, for example. So these are just like some of the technical things that we do with youth players just to get them more skills and make them more well-rounded.
Stop trying to rush people into the first team. Jim Housen, thank you so much for your super chat. He basically says, so glad you're covering the women's team. I'm going to try to do more of it. Right now, I don't want to do it if I'm not going to do it well, to be honest. It's like I have a lot on my plate, but I do want to check in on them, and they're doing a really, really good job. And it's something that I want people to really look at and not just be like, women's football. Like, it's good, you guys. Like, come on, just watch it. But yeah, the last thing I do want to talk about is, and maybe towards the end we can do like just some individual players that people throw out into the chat. Per Mertesacker as a DOF, that's come up on my timeline, and I thought, that's an interesting proposition. He's kind of doing a kind of job like that at the moment.
It's the baby role at the academy.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's not a bad, like, when you hear things, sometimes you're like, I wasn't like that. I was like, let me tell me more. So what do you guys think about that? Like Per Mertesacker potentially being a DOF at Arsenal in the future. I'm not sold on Edu. And I think what Per is doing so far is pretty impressive, so what do you think about that? Would you think that Per could do a job at DOF in the future? What do you think?
Potentially. I think.
Why are you not as excited as me? When I saw it, I said,
Yeah, no. It's not so much. It's not actually so much Mertesacker. It's actually more what's above him. For me, it's the same issue I have with Edu. The problem is, I know Mertesacker's working on this. I think his network of people that he's now like connecting with in terms of just being able to make deals with, getting those relationships with other clubs. I know it's on the under 23, more of a youth level, but it is still a relationship that he's building with these teams to be able to then in the future negotiate deals with and be able to get those players on a bit more of a bargain. But the problem still comes to, is your network big enough to take that role? Because at Arsenal, that's my concern right now, is Edu wants to do Edu signings. Is Per Mertesacker going to go into that sort of role? And if he has a CEO that's not Vinay, and it's maybe, let's say, in a Campos or someone else that's a bit more connected, or more like in within the Europe community, but then also into the American, South American, etc., then it works. But that's my issue. It's not so much Mertesacker. I do think his talent ID and his talent, acquisitions are a lot better than what Edu has. And I feel like he understands where we're trying to go a bit better than what Edu does. Because don't forget, like, Per Mertesacker and Lundberg were the reason why Saka got his opportunity. So it's one of those where I think, because obviously when he's doing the under-23s, he understands what's happening in the whole youth setup. Then when he comes into that directors of football position, then the only thing he really needs to do, which he doesn't even need to do, to be honest, is understand what the first team are doing. But that's synchronized anyway, so he'll understand what's going on there. So his talent ID and his criteria are going to match the likes of, let's say it's Arteta. Arteta's going to go to Per Mertesacker, and Per Mertesacker, I already know what you want. Here's a list of what I've seen. What do you think? And it makes the job a lot easier. But then the problem comes to is the connections that Arsenal have, not as a club, but as individuals, enough to get these deals done? Because that's what we've notoriously been struggling with. Like, for example, even with the Lacazette deal, they didn't want to deal with Leon because the president's hard to deal with. But if you have those connections, if you have that foot in with them, then it's one of those where it becomes a lot easier. We'll start to see us not wasting money per se, like the Pepe deal. I don't want to get into that, but what happened with that deal. That's all it is for me. And I think Mertesacker getting in, perfect. But then I just want Vinay gone, to be honest. That's my agenda.
I'm going to get excited, Jess, with you because honestly, I've been peddling this for a while. Okay, the reason why I'm very happy for Per Mertesacker to step in that role, and actually I will push it, is because of the types of moves that he's made. In terms of, since 2018, you look at that way of playing, he's recruited domestic recruitments, he's revolutionized the recruitment department on his own. He's revolutionized how that play is consistent among every single part of the academy. He's brought in youth talent right now that are specific to gaps in that team. We look at Salah Ad-Din, that also are gaps in the first team. This is what's the big difference is. Mika Bareth, Nikolaj Moller, target man strikers. Like, he's recognized the biggest weaknesses both in the first team but also the academy that he's able to do, not just domestically. He hasn't just isolated one market. He's looked abroad. Omar Rekic, a really great ball playing center back. Like, he has recruited the connections in terms of recruitment, in terms of infrastructure of people. He hasn't just surrounded himself with, one or two people. He's really revolutionized that department as a whole. So I think he's got all of the makings of a world-class leader of something. If he doesn't do that, I can assure you he's going to move on and do something a lot bigger, because what he's done hasn't just been head of the academy type stuff. Like, he's really revolutionized that entire department in terms of how we run. And so I think he'll absolutely do excellent in that DOF. I think ideally, if you're really asking me, though, I would love Michael Edwards. Like, that would be a signing that for me, who would change the direction of this club. And, you've got Per that could learn off somebody who I consider the holy grail of director of footballs. Like, that guy is absolutely immense. And then I do see him moving in that position in the future, though, because how he's gone about that head of youth kind of development or head of the academy, whatever title you want to do, it wasn't just youth, I guess is my point.
It wasn't.
He went into totally different departments. So he's done it, but maybe that transition of I think a Michael Edwards, I've said it before, is the best signing that we could make in the next window. He is the best one that we could make to change this club.
I'll never forget, if you go back and you watch Arteta's first day at Arsenal, he walks in with his little suit and shit, and then he sees Per at the little computers, and he says, Saka, we have tons of work to do. And I was like, oh shit, and I was like, yeah, you do. You got a lot of work to do. And from that moment, you just knew that it's always been said that they've worked very closely together to create the vision. And one thing that you have to, you may not like what Arteta's doing on the pitch, but I think he's committed to the restructuring and the new vision that is Arsenal Football Club. And that really does have a lot to do with Per. It starts from there too, because that's where we're going to get a lot of our talent. We're just not those types of clubs that just ignore their academy. It's a big part of the fabric of our club. So I don't think it's just
understand that. That's the big
he does.
He grew up in an academy setup that believed in the youth in La Masia. So I think that complements him, and that's why it's excelling so much.
All right, they're done. Rank our top 5 youngsters, George. He said, stop talking macro, let's get micro, let's get specific.
Okay,
give me names.
Okay, so I'm not going to do order. because I think it's ridiculous in terms of like,
No,
one's
order.
better than the
You
other.
gotta do
But
a
I'll
No,
give
order.
you,
order, fam.
I'll give you the top 5 youngsters that are 100% making it in my opinion. So
Woo,
Keto Taylor Hart,
pressure.
Oh
Keto
my
Taylor
god,
Hart.
is that first or fifth?
Not doing that. I can't do that to them.
Okay,
I
so
love them all the
Keto
same.
fifth.
So Keto. Oh my god, he's the one that I believe in the most. I think that kid is a superstar. But Keto Taylor Hart, Brooke Norden Cuffey, a right back, by the way, for those that are asking, do we have any right back, left back? That guy is certified, absolutely going to make it to the first team.
Cool
Kyle
name.
Walker. Brooke Norden Cuffey is an excellent name. He passes the name test. Zane Monlouis, who I don't think people are talking about enough. He's a Rolls Royce of a center back. This kid is very, very tall. He's absolutely he's somebody that's just totally in the mold of a ball playing center back that you would love. I think in terms of Miguel and Charlie Patino, like they're certainties, but maybe I just want to kind of talk about names that people don't know. And that would probably be Salah Ad-Din, who was out injured for over a year. This is a
Where
kid
did he
that
come from? They brought him for free, didn't they?
they brought him from. Oh God, was it Ajax
like
or
PSV
Amsterdam?
or?
Yeah, it was like PSV or something. It was somewhere in the Dutch league that they brought him, and he's been absolutely immense this season. But he's been injured for a year. But that's somebody I would really keep an eye on if you're looking at the youth. I think Mika Bareth, who did come in, is absolutely insane right now. I'm really liking what I'm seeing in terms of a complete 9. And
Who is
so
he like? Give it like if you had to think of like a name of somebody who he plays similar to,
Okay, so God, it's really tough because he's 6'2" and you wouldn't get it, but really Eduardo, he has every finishing in his locker, Mika Bareth. And this is why, Eduardo, like old Eduardo from Arsenal. That's what he gives me and why I get really excited because this kid is also 6'2" and like he's got the physicality. Really? Yeah, like this kid is huge. And that's why I find it's really funny that you give a Eduardo comparison because really he's off the ball and he's excellent. So that's one. And of course, I'll probably end on everyone's name on the list. Amari Hutchinson, who is excellent. He is. And I know, and they're like, where is he? And I'm like, I'm getting there. Calm down. He is phenomenal. But he's another one that I think needs just a little bit more of physical development himself. I think personally, my favorite position for him is actually attacking midfield because I feel as though his ability to get on the half turn is just absolutely immense. Like it's just crazy what this kid can do with the ball at his feet. And I feel as though he's got the vision to really play in that 10. But look, he's nominally a winger, right? Like that's what he's grew up on. And, they actually had him left back for a large portion of his career to really teach him some defensive duties. But I think those are names that you can really get excited about, at least in that level. And I think the one thing that I will say is I almost feel that there is a position in the academy everywhere except for left back and left center back that we have exciting talent that will potentially make the first team. And I know that's a very bold statement to make, but in terms of center back, right back, center mid, deep lying playmakers, in terms of wingers, in terms of strikers, like we really do have it all. And I haven't even talked about John Jules, Tyrese John Jules, who many people don't know about.
What's going on with him?
Well, he's had some stop-starts in terms of injury himself, but he's with Doncaster, and he should really do well. I expect him to explode similarly as well. He was not at Doncaster; he was there, and he got injured. But he's on loan; he'll come back. He's more of that kind of complete 9 profile as well, and he's similarly stupid in terms of potential. So, yeah, there's a ton of them. You got Daniel Ballard, who also is out on loan.
I love him.
He's an international. Like I think he absolutely comes in and replaces, Rob Holding for me. And like I'm moving him on. Yeah, I am. And so I feel as though Daniel Ballard to come in. But just to review, look, I think Arthur Okonkwo is massive, but we've already recruited him. I think Daniel Ballard, Zane Monlouis are excellent center backs. I think Brooke Norden Cuffey at right back is going to be your player. I think you've got essentially Patino Aziz at CM 6'8", and then you've got really Amari Hutchinson, you've got Salah Ad-Din, and you've got Keto Taylor Hart, and then of course Mika Bareth and Tyrese John Jules at striker. So when I talk about there being legitimately a youngster everywhere bar left back and left center back, I mean it. And, like that S has said, John Jules made the U21s. Like, this kid is immense.
Yay. I thought he was going to be one of those that kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit, one of those. But he's always kind of been there a little bit. Like, I know he had like a toe injury or something like that kind of kept him out for a while.
Yeah.
But I've always liked his profile. I just thought he needed to go out on loan. And yeah, let's see. I mean, it's so funny because people are still hung up on certain players. And I'm like, you guys, we have talent coming through our freaking ears. Like, don't freaking worry about some of these guys. Like, it's just, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about like anything but like Saka and them, like, because they're still here with us. But like, unfortunately, like, well, Willick is no longer an Arsenal player. And Nketiah is going to go. Nelson, my gosh.
Well, I would encourage people to look at some of these players just because Daniel Ballard is very ready for he plays for Millwall. And again, these are championship teams, so it's a very good level. And, John Jules is playing for Blackpool. So, again, they're only on loans, but I think actually John Jules has been very carefully mapped out in terms of his pathway. And as a complete 9, these guys take a little bit longer to develop because they're really involved in a lot more phases of play. So they won't be necessarily like your kind of Sakas in terms of really quick into the first team. But that kid, he's been highlighted by Mikel too, by the way, in the past. Tyrese has. So I think they very much consider him. And, he's starting tons of games and look, he's doing well. He's doing well. He just had a stop-start injury production, and that's why we maybe haven't seen him as much as Balogun has.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's
Curran loves his complete 9s, so yeah, he's very interested to hear about some of those. But
so I mean, we know who George's favorite is. I mean, he may not be his favorite is Keto Taylor Hart, isn't it? It is your favorite.
No, it's Holding. It's Holding.
So who's your do you have a favorite out of the academy right now? I think I have one, but do you have one?
Oh, it's so tough. It's so tough. Like, where do I start? Eddie and Nketiah, maybe.
He's not even really our academy.
Yeah. He should be. He'd excel in the academy. No, I'm joking. I mean, Keto, obviously, there's no denying that. Balogun, I do like, because I still technically think he is somewhat in the academy.
He's promoted though, right? Because he got into the picture.
Well, I'll leave. But I think for me, I'll go different. I'll go Omari Hutchison. He just excites me. I think he's. So, I don't really know where to begin with him because he's one of those talents that it's like. When I watched Pedri come through, or when I watched Ansu Fati come through for Barcelona, it just excited me. It was like, yes. And that's what it reminds me of with Hutchinson.
Yes.
It's like, yes, like finally. There
was some bass in that statement. You knew he really believed it. There was a little bit of growl.
Yes. Because because we know we're in a position where as much as we've got, I know we've got Bukayo Saka, but Pepe's moving on, for example. Aubameyang's looking to move on, for example.
You don't know Pepe's moving on. Stop.
Oh, he's moving on. I'll make sure he's moving on.
Why are we kicking him out? Oh, yeah. God.
And then, but then it's like, who do they pass that torch to? And it's, for me, Hutchison does come through. Keto Taylor Hart comes through, and they take that because the attacking positions for me are where you hand your torches over to. It's like, I wish we had Henry. I wish he passed his torch over to someone, but unfortunately, we didn't have that level of someone to step up. It's like Messi's now left earlier that he wasn't able to pass his torch on to Ansu Fati, even though he kind of indirectly did. And that's what it is for me for Keto Taylor Hart. You're passing that torch on the future of Arsenal. And then
being in a track meeting, you're like, take the baton, and there's nobody there.
I guess I come from that side of football where I'm like, yeah, you pass the torch on, but yeah.
Well, okay, you know what? The only thing that I will say though, a big reason, I'll be honest with you, a big reason why I don't want a deep lying playmaker is not just my aversion to that type, but really Patino, Aziz, even. I don't think that's where he's best, but he could play there. Jack Henry Francis is another one that's in that type.
He's so cute.
He is. He's smaller, but but these profiles, they're all in that type, and I think they're good enough. Patino is recognized as a pathway for me, so I really feel recruiting something in that mold blocks that pathway a little bit for me. I would rather, when we do recruit for a gap, not only in your first team but also in your academy. So, for example, I think when you get a type of sitter, we don't really have a sitter that I believe in terribly. We have Tim Akinola, who was a recent recruit, but he is very up and down in terms of his performance levels.
Isn't he a Spurs? Wasn't he a Spurs? Wasn't it him?
I don't
Came from
remember. I don't
Spurs.
think it was him, but
I remember
do
when Purd
remember.
grabbed a couple of people. Like he grabbed a couple of guys. I think.
Dinyehi was a Spurs.
Okay, so
player,
yeah,
but yeah,
so
there
I
was
like,
one.
I was like, what is he doing here? He don't belong. But no, but I get you. Like, and S makes a good point. Like, usually if I don't know anything about these players, I'll go on to this PB comps on the YouTube on the YouTube. Why am I so old? On the YouTube and look at these players, and ultimately, like, we don't get to see the full game, but it gives you a good idea of playing style and
Arsenal.com though, guys. Like I would do like, okay, this is what I do, and it's so shameless, but like I'm so invested that I do sign up to like other people's like clubs accounts, like Derby, that do
they
show
them
games.
the full games. Yep.
Yeah. So like when we do play, like I'll sign up to like other clubs, and you can see them.
Cancel your membership right after.
100%. I'm so shameless. Like I do the 3-month trial, and I have my burner email. I'm so sick, but literally, but you do that, and like you can find them on the .com as well, and they do highlights as well. So like I would definitely check it out. I think it's worth, only because I say it. Kevin Betsy is really, really good. He started to really get some results for the youth team, and I think a lot of people are seeing it. And I love Kevin Betsy. I talked about it with the FA, but this is the kid that led the U17, and I know people are like, oh, but that team had Foden and they were stacked. I go, no, he was a very special coach in terms of that, and I was so excited. Man United is stacked. Yeah. Oh God, that's another one.
No, let me stop.
But yeah.
Before we get out of here, I do want to say who my favorite is. Not like it matters, but I think Aziz is my favorite. Like I just feel
that kid's special.
I just love him, and I'm just like, he's gonna be a superstar. Like you could just kind of see it. He's like the perfect midfielder. I mean, I think if I had like the perfect midfielder that I could think of, it's probably Bellingham. But I think there's a other type of midfielder like an Aziz, a little bit different, not as robust, but still very, very good and well-rounded. And I like that about Aziz because he can kind of do it all. And a lot of midfielders, they're missing something. You could tell like he's just getting exponentially better in every single thing that he does. And I do miss the dreads. Like that was his like little look. I would always look for the guy with the dreads. I'm like, there's Aziz, he's there. But I can't wait to see him in the first team eventually. I'm not going to rush him in like you guys are trying to do Patino. But yeah. All right, you guys.
You're getting too excited. It's only been a season.
It's only been a season. I can't the way like trying to rush these guys into the freaking team. Like it's
the only thing, Jess, is like I just probably want to end is I think the one thing that I want people to take away is that it's not just one or two youngsters. Like we've continued huge amounts of productions, and like we've named players, and it's not just like it's not another case of people overhyping youngsters. I legitimately think there are talents and stars that we're going to see in this first team, and we're producing at every level of the pitch. Goalkeeper, defenders, attacking, and it's not just one type of player. We really, really are producing at crazy levels, and I think it's time to get excited. It's really worth investing in both the women's team as well as the academy, because I think these infrastructures, they're part of our club, and I think it's just important for fans to get a really well-rounded education on Arsenal by looking into these things, because they matter. And I think that's a big reason why I think City are successful. They recognize the importance of those pillars in the team. It's not just the first team.
Yep. All right, you guys, this is a super, super random pod, but we got through it. I didn't know what to talk about, so I was like, let's do something different. And we kind of talked about Champions League at the beginning. We talked about the women. We've spoken about the academy, and we had a lot of fun doing it. So there's about 100 of you guys watching on all platforms. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, all those great things. What am I doing later? I'll be back tomorrow doing something. You guys, I never really know. But Friday is going to be Q&A. So you guys, if you have questions, you can just save them until the Q&A, and we can just do a whole hour of that. Remember when that was all the shows was just Q&As because we couldn't figure out what to do? It's so funny.
That's what influencers kind of go to, isn't it? When you're like, I don't know what to do. Q&A.
100%. You see somebody do a Q&A, they have ran out of ideas. And then on Saturday, what I'm trying to do is do match previews on the day of the games, because I think they're more interesting once you actually have the lineup. So we're doing those as well, like so we don't have to waste our time doing predicted because they never come true. But yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.